I think we can all agree that smartphones have gotten just a little bit boring these days, and that might seem like a huge disappointment for all of us who really love smartphones and every generation that comes out with all the new innovations. But I think it's in times like these that we see a lot more refinement of the little things that make up for a big difference in the long term. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm Nick Gray, and this is my review of the OnePlus 11. I've been using this phone on and off for about 2 months now, and I have to say it is a pretty boring smartphone. Other than the unique camera module on the back of the phone that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Now, I don't really hate it, but it's definitely a design choice that I wouldn't have made. Other than that, there's really not much else that stands out with this smartphone. And despite it being a flagship tier device, it's honestly pretty forgettable. But that also means there's really nothing major to complain about. But honestly, that may just be enough if you're looking for a new flagship phone to carry you through for the next 2 to 3 years. Today, I'm not going to be getting into the philosophy of what a OnePlus phone should be, but I will say that the device offers quite a bit more value than what we've seen from the brand in the past few years. Priced at $699 for the base model or $799 if you're looking for the upgrades, the OnePlus 11 is a fairly good deal. You get the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset from Qualcomm, 8 or 12 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigs or 256 gigabytes of storage, and an impressive display. A decent camera system on the back and battery life that honestly puts last year's OnePlus 10 Pro to shame. And if you haven't noticed, green is the go-to color for flagship smartphones this year. While I do love some of the green options that we've seen from Samsung, Honor, and a couple other devices, the color here for the OnePlus 11 just isn't for me. And fortunately, there's a black version as well, which honestly I would have preferred over this. The OnePlus 11 does sport IP64 dust and water resistance, which means you should definitely stay away from dropping this phone in the pool since it's only splash resistant, unlike the IP68 ratings that we've seen on most other flagship devices, which offer protection up to 1.5 meters of water for up to 30 minutes. The price that OnePlus is charging for this phone is actually pretty reasonable. In fact, it's the cheapest phone on the market with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset that you can find in the US right now, coming in at $100 less than what you would pay for a similar Galaxy S23, but honestly, you should be comparing it to the S23 Plus, which is a $1,000 smartphone. The base model comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage. But for $100 more, you double the storage and the RAM, and that storage upgrade gets you UFS 4.0, which is twice as fast. Now, a lot of people are gonna look at that and simply say you have to upgrade simply based on that alone. But honestly, even if you're loading up large games, which can sometimes take 20 to 30 seconds, the difference here is gonna be negligible, saving you maybe a second or two in the long run. In regular day-to-day use, the overall power and speed improvements to the OnePlus 11 over last year's OnePlus 10 Pro are pretty hard to pinpoint. But honestly, the thing that you're gonna notice the most is the massive improvement in battery life that you get with this new device, which I think is more important than anything else. But if you are into mobile gaming and worry about just having the best frames per second possible, this phone should definitely excite you. Benchmark numbers are up across the board with 3D Mark, Geekbench, and PC Mark by roughly 30 to 40%. You'll easily be able to max out the settings in Call of Duty Mobile and even push Genshin Impact to nearly 60 frames per second, even with longer gaming sessions running 20 to 30 minutes. But again, I do think that the battery life really tells the better story here, as you'll be able to play for significantly longer on this device, even with those higher frame rates. Our battery benchmark numbers show that the performance of this device is up 16.5% over last year's OnePlus 10 Pro, despite the fact that both of these devices have the same 5,000 mAh battery capacity on the inside. As for battery longevity, the OnePlus 11 lasted me just a little bit longer than what the Galaxy S23 Ultra did, leaving me with roughly 20 to 30% charge at the end of the day, even while using the camera and gaming for hours. And of course, the cherry on top is that the phone's SuperVOOC charging will deliver a full charge from 0% all the way to 100 in about 30 minutes. It's definitely not the fastest smartphone charging that's out there, but it's still twice the speed of what we get from Samsung devices and Google smartphones as well. The only downside here is that OnePlus decided to remove wireless charging this time around from the OnePlus 11, something that they had finally given us with last year's OnePlus 10 Pro. And that brings us to the cameras. Now, on paper, the setup of the OnePlus 11 is pretty good with a 50 megapixel primary camera, 48 megapixel ultra wide that doubles as a macro camera, and then a 32 megapixel telephoto camera. Unfortunately, that telephoto camera is just a 2x zoom. It would have been nice if it was 3 to 5x like a lot of other flagship devices that are out there. It performs pretty well in well-lit conditions, but because you are just limited to a 2x magnification, you're definitely a lot better off using that main camera in low light conditions and then just cropping in afterwards. As for the primary camera, it is incredibly sharp, delivering consistent results in pretty much any lighting scenario. And I do also appreciate the Hasselblad color tuning, which does bring the colors in the photos to life just a little bit more. OnePlus has also gotten really good at subject separation between the background and foreground in portrait shots, so if you're going to be using that feature, you won't be disappointed. Video capture is surprisingly good on the OnePlus 11 with that main camera, recording in 4K as I'm doing right now. You can also switch over to the ultra wide and record 4K as well on the fly. You don't have to stop and start again. But if you switch to the 2X camera, it actually doesn't switch. It's just a digital crop on that main sensor. Not sure why they've decided to take that approach, because the sensor itself should be able to capture 4K video, but you technically can't get video out of that 2X camera unless you switch over to 1080p. And that sensor used for the selfie camera up front does struggle a little bit with dynamic range and low light conditions as well. You can capture some decent shots every now and then, but you will have to settle for blown out skies during the daytime and incredibly grainy shots when captured at night. As you can tell, it's not a device you should specifically buy for its cameras, but if that's not your #1 priority or even your #2 priority, the experience is perfectly fine, and this phone can take some pretty good shots. I guess my only personal disappointment this year is that we don't have a Pro model that takes things to the next level. The $699 OnePlus 11 is a great phone, and the upgrades that you actually get with the $100 upgrade are quite substantial. But if you're in it for the cameras, this phone isn't nearly as compelling as what we get from a lot of competing devices these days. But if that's really not what you're looking for in the phone, it's honestly hard to find any glaring omissions that should keep you away from this year's OnePlus 11. As unintuitive as this might sound, I think the OnePlus 11 has actually taken a couple steps forward by toning things down this year in order to create a device that's truly compelling, that undercuts the competition by a couple $100s. As mentioned at the beginning, this phone here compares to the Galaxy S23 Plus, which costs $300 more. The question is, has OnePlus cut out too much to make this phone as appealing as it should be? Well, that's only a question that you'll be able to answer when you decide if the OnePlus 11 is the right device for you. Let me know what you think of this phone in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our next videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.